Good evening and welcome to a new episode of the Daily Debates Wednesday evening. I'm Yasmin Bakir, and tonight we are going to be shedding light on the new crossing to the victory that Egypt has achieved on several levels, whether it's on the political level, on the economic level, and even on a strategic level. Now, President Sisi's successive achievements for long years and his tremendous efforts to be able to push Egypt towards a better ranking towards in front of the world and economically. And of course, when the whole entire world were hit with the COVID-19 pandemic several months ago, many countries were expecting to have recession and economic difficulties and a lot of struggle. And we have noticed that very clearly on the developed world. But if it wasn't for Egypt's strict austerity measures and economic reform program and the continuation with the efforts and all the institutions and the leadership and the entire country, basically, whether we're talking about the public or the private sector contribution in standing still and working towards development, Egypt will not be able to be on the stable ground today. It's very important to shed light on the steps that Egypt has taken. We have a very important guest who is joining us today, because he will be able to fill us in with what exactly has happened to Egypt during the past couple of days. And when we talk about victory, we're not just celebrating anniversaries and days, but we're always celebrating every day that we take a step forward with development and inaugurate new projects that helps to pour into for the direct benefit of this Egyptian citizen is a victory and celebration. Tonight we have joining us Dr. Ibrahim Ghazawy, a professor of international relations. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr.
Thank
Ibrahim.
you so much.
Now, we celebrated the October victory. We celebrate all of usually October for the victory, and we spoke about that last week. But today we want to talk about the new crossing, or the crossing of the new Egypt. And here we are going to be reflecting back on or assessing the leap of change, whether it is on the geographical map and the expansion potentially on the ground here in Egypt. What can you tell us briefly?
Well, I have to start with the fact that October War and victory is not only remarkable because of its military outcome, which have changed the terrain of the region and has given Egypt back not only our land, but our pride and sensation of superiority in the region, but also in the sense of regaining our sensation of looking at the future. I always say that war is not just armies. War, we battle against poverty, we battle against
even direct
diseases.
Confrontation between countries is no longer direct confrontation with
exactly.
armies.
So the classic version of war is no longer, occurring at the same rate and tempo that it happened at the past. So that's why we this year celebrate October War and victory in different sense. A sense that overlook the future while looking also at the past and backward, because sometimes we need to do this. We need to review some lessons. We need to review some tactics and some plans, and we need also to review some I would say successful lessons and also some failure lessons. And we have to make use of all of this together while we are jumping into the future with I would say a confidence attitude. I say confident because when we hold some lines of development, on top of them economy, and on top of them education, on top of them strategy, on top of them the unity of our lands, and all of these threads or lines, we are keeping them up and protecting them at the very same time in a very troubled region around us, where most of the countries around us have very severe problems that undermine their existence. Here comes the positive look, which we have to keep to our country today. We are moving forwards. Yes, we still have, of course, so many problems, but we have gone far enough in the long line of development. And the more important of that is that we found out that where to go. We know exactly where we have to go. We know exactly where the weak points are. As I said at the beginning, when we look backward a little bit, we know the weakness. We know some failures. Normally it happens everywhere in the world, in any society. And we should not be ashamed of some, experiences. We're not successful enough.
Exactly, that's where you learn.
Yeah, that's how we learn. But we should not just leave them, like that. We have to make use of them. We have to build on the learned lessons. And we have many lessons indeed to build on.
I'm glad you mentioned building and lessons and battling, because we're always in a battle with regard, despite the fact that generations changes and the type of battle and the weapons or the tools that you'd use would change. And I would want to talk more about the role of the nation, because there are some things that are consistent by time. And since you've mentioned the region, and since you've mentioned things that are of similarities, we will really have to talk more about the role the Egyptian nation had played and has been playing and is always playing in achievements in Egypt. But allow us to go out to this first report for this episode, and a new crossing battle led by President Sisi since he came office. And there's, as I said, it's always a different kind and form of battle, and not just the ordinary form of battle. Not only are we celebrating the month of October on the anniversary of the 1973 war, but we're also celebrating achievements that are made by one great man who made promises and kept them in surely and tightly as he came along into power. Let's take a look.
No doubt the miracles that the heroes of the 6th of October victory have achieved in 1973 have completed changed the face of Egypt. The historical victory has been achieved by crossing from defeat to victory, restoring the Egyptian dignity and land. Today, Egypt is witnessing a new crossing to victory, with various accomplishments all over the state through a new crossing battle led by President Fattah Sisi to rebuild Egypt and plan its path to the future in a way that consolidates its regional and global presence. The achievements attained by President Fattah Sisi improves the civilized image of Egypt and transforms the state into one of the respected nations. Locally, the president keeps on accelerating the implementation rates and integrate working mechanisms among all sectors in the state in pursuit of achieving the desired strategic goal of increasing the urban and agricultural areas, establishing new societies, and providing job opportunities nationwide. President Fattah Sisi manages to enhance Egypt's civilized image. He accomplished more achievements and established many projects, leading to a paradigm shift in Egypt at all levels and in all walks of life. Regionally, Egypt has re-embraced Africa once again and leads the world to peace under the leadership of President Fattah Sisi. The Egyptian state has regained its weight in Africa under the wise policy of President Fattah Sisi, based on preserving Egyptian interests and respecting the rights and sovereignty of neighboring countries. Globally, President Fattah Sisi cast the Egyptian role on issues not only in the Arab and African regions, but also others across the world. Those stances reflect positively Egypt's reputation and strengthen the state's ties with all states in the world, especially the superpowers and influential countries. All these successes are considered a new crossing for the Egyptian nation. And just as the 6th of October battle has been a starting point by freeing the land and expelling the enemy, the state, after June 30th revolution, has been able to expel another enemy of terrorist groups and to found a new path of construction of development. Long live Egypt! Long live Egypt! Long live Egypt!
Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on The Daily Debate. I'm still joined in with Dr. Ibrahim Ghazawy, Professor of International Relations. Thank you once again, Doctor. And before we went out to this report, you were mentioning a couple of points that I would like you to reflect and shed further light on. And let's talk about the consistencies that have been taking place since 1973 up until today in terms of the nature of the Egyptian nation and the place of the Egyptian nation, how nations do contribute to a large extent to the achievements and the fight against any battle within their nations internally, if I may say.
Well, you touched on a very important topic, which is how any society, how any nation could be able to first identify its challenges, and then second, how to fight and how to, look into solutions. That's why, if we consider the two consecutive revolutions that happened in the January Revolution and 30 June Revolution, if we look at them and the passage of our recent development, we could identify two major points of how to change the classic look at the future itself, the challenges. But today, after 7 years of 30 June Revolution, I think we have gone far enough in terms of this identification process. I would repeat identification because it's so important as a society, as a nation. We have to identify what is our problems. And when we talk about problems, I'm not talking about the problems that were associated with the revolution, were associated with this political turmoil that took place in Egypt in the wake of 25th January or 30 June January, because these concerns at that time were not permanent by nature, or were not chronic. They were temporarily associated with a situation at that time. It was going to be very dangerous for this circumstances to continue. So why? Because instead of looking into changing our chronic problems, like economy, like education, like culture, like healthcare, like everything, our chronic problems, we were just looking at other temporary problems like security, how to get from house to work, whether the courts...
Stability, basically.
Yes, stability.
It's like starting from scratch, basically.
Yeah, like starting from scratch, like, very primitive societies at the very early stage in our history, our human history, they were not, secured to move. So that's why I said, luckily we did not stay a long time at this period.
Stage, yes.
We have gone, far beyond this limit today to get back to the positive point of, identifying where our problems are, our real problems, where these problems are, and how can we confront them. Back to your question about the nation and how, this consistency. Yes, in 1973, in October War, that was a very necessary and a step to, to start a new era. Unless you had that victory at that time, we wouldn't be able to move any single step forward at that time. Because we were not having this momentum or power. Part of our land was occupied. We have this broken pride, and such sensation when it comes to any society, it keeps it always down. So you have to get rid of them as soon as possible. And you cannot get rid of this without, a tangible and real military victory. And that's what happened in 1973, opening the window for sustainable and positive change in everything. What I say by positive change, what I mean, looking into our chronic problems to deal with them. And if looking at the stage in Egypt today, the stage of events today, when we talk about the main or the core issues that make concern for normal people in the street, we talk about economy, and we talk about education, we talk about security, and stability. We talk about development, we talk about employment, and we talk about investment. So a lot of things. Luckily today we look into these issues in a very well-orchestrated manner.
Well-orchestrated and very well planned, and maybe the irony of going in between the past and the future, because where we stand today is like 20 years into our future in terms of development and working parallelly on all these files. All together at one time with a very strong will and leadership and determination. But I also want to talk about terrorism because the comparison is very different. You had an enemy back then that you knew what the boundaries were, what you're negotiating on, what you're fighting on before the negotiating and peace process came. But the nature of the battle today is different, and terrorism and international phenomena being faced back since 2001, it had extended its arms to every single nation around the world. Egypt had a very different experience with its fight against terrorism and extremism, and specifically in North Sinai. Today, where does the situation stand? And speaking of development, and maybe we've are airing and have aired a couple of moments ago, development of Sinai and how that would change the face of the terrorist mentality, if I may say, in ideology in this region.
Well, let us agree on the fact that there won't be time, even in the near future or even in the far future, where you won't find terrorism in the world.
Exactly.
Terrorism is unfortunately...
Unless those who finance it stop, which is not going to be the case.
It's not going to happen, you know. It's you know, I would say...
no, that's what happens when you have extra money. You don't know what to do with.
Exactly.
Then you start thinking of,
that's
you
why
know,
you will always
destroying other nations because it becomes a hobby more than anything else for you.
But even looking at this fact, it doesn't mean that we have to leave things go the way it wants.
Of course not.
We have to control this. We have to do our best to, you know, take the level of, you know, terrorism activities to the minimal level, possible level. And that passage...
What does that mean, minimum possible level? What are the requirements of reaching a minimum possible level in dealing with terrorism? Yeah,
because actually we have to, you know, analyze the roots, to know the reasons, and try to find solutions, and get a little bit away from the classic way of confrontation, which is normal security confrontation. Well, security confrontation is very much important and very strategic and very much needed in most of the times, if not all the times. But it's not going to give decisive solutions in the long run. So that's why President Sisi said many times that we have to look into terrorism from different viewpoints. We have to go to the roots. We have to address the reasons. We have to all the society have to work together, from the societal side, from the society side itself, and also from the government side, all the ministries.
And then we have the religious side, because sadly it's always linked to Islam, which is nothing to do with Islam, and everybody knows that by now, except those people who are brainwashed. Now, you're talking here about different directives. You're talking about the economic perspective, which is development in this part of the country, where people will have better chances and better development. So there's a feeling of longing to and the patriotism towards your land. It's yours, it's your house, it's your, and you get better.
Creating hopes.
Yes, exactly. And then there's the religious dialogue, so that you can counter-resist these ideologies, these extremist ideologies that lead to people joining terrorists and terrorism. And you have, what else do you work on apart than the traditional means of overcoming terrorism?
Well, actually you have several lines. We can work on education, is very important. Also employment and work opportunities, which is the economy. Economy is so important because it laid the foundation for, as I always say, creating hopes for everyone. Hope. He has hope and he protects his hope. If you give him a moderate and
you mean a goal, a
yeah,
reason
a
why
goal,
you exist?
Yeah, a goal, a house, a work
apart from wanting to go to heaven.
A future, yeah. Instead of you know, letting him aside, you know, isolated without moderate income, unable to cover his own expenses and unable to find his own way to create a family, and a lot of, you know, suffering in his face, or confront everyday problems. In that respect, you give him hope. You create hope for him. And this is very important. And I think one of the most important factors of influence on terrorism is economy. Is economy, and how to you know, upgrade the living conditions for your people and the society. And of course it has to be associated, as you mentioned, with some religious steps has to be taken, and also educational, health care.
How do you get those educational perspective? Because, and I'm talking here again because on several occasions President Assisi always reiterated that the war on terrorism will not end until the right of every martyr died for the sake of the nation is restored, and not only that, but the way that these terrorist organizations are handling these terrorists, at the end of the day, there must be people who are going to be doing these terrorist acts. They're not going to be done by themselves. When you're talking about education, are you talking about educating children in school? Are you talking about creating communities? Are you talking about bridging the gap between the different social standards? I mean, what terms of education is going to be able to eradicate terrorism from the roots in a very short time?
Well, that's a long story, but I have to be, you know, going to the points. Education is so productive and helpful when it is creating a passage for the future, when it opens the way for you to find better life. And if education, the way, you know, unfortunately, it's still, you know, to some extent going until today, we have less chronic problems of education, and we have hundreds of thousands of graduates every year, but they don't find jobs. So what do you expect those, you know, big army of graduates every year, and the number is getting bigger, and figures accumulated over years and years, and all of a sudden you don't know exactly what to do with them, and you all of a sudden, you know, find yourself in the face of this big number of unemployed, you know, youth, and you don't have alternatives. You know, for what are they going to do as a state? Responsible. The state itself, the government is responsible. That's why the problem today is much more complicated than it was 30 years ago. The current government inherited a very heavy burden, you know, issues. On top of them comes education and employment, and they both associated with economy. That's why the economic reform program that started in November 2016 was inevitable, was so enormously important for us, because unless you make economic reforms, you cannot talk about changing education, you cannot talk about changing unemployment, you cannot talk about changing inflation. You cannot talk about
and definitely not changing them overnight. And that's why we're saying carrying a burden of 30 years of challenges and obstacles on all levels is not going to be resolved very soon, although by will and determination, belief and very hard work, that was able to be achieved to a very large extent in a shortest period of time. What was done in 7 years was supposed to be taken 20 years, and that's according to researchers and where the president said himself, because that's exactly what's on the ground. Not only that, but today Egypt stands on a different ground, and it has been pushing Egypt's position in front of the world on an economic level. And if you're allowed to go to the second report, Dr. Ibrahim, the World Bank hails Egypt's economic reforms despite the challenges, even despite the COVID-19 pandemic.
The World Bank has hailed Egypt's economic reforms that contributed to improving the macroeconomic stability, bolstering the investment's trust, and increasing in the inflow of foreign direct investment. In a report titled International Debt Statistics, the World Bank said Egypt is a bright spot. FDI inflows rose 11% to $9 billion in response to economic reforms that improved macroeconomic stability and bolstered investors' confidence. The report pointed out that a significant share of these flows went into the oil and gas sector, in addition to the fact that telecommunications and consumer goods also managed to attract huge investments. Noteworthy, the economic performance indicators following the June 30th revolution have recorded a continuous rise at a steady pace, which helps the state complete a large number of mega national projects, support national investments, and industrialization. Egypt's economic program also helps unleash the capacities of vital sectors of agriculture, agro-industrialization, and manufacturing industries, in addition to developing education and health sectors and realizing significant discoveries in oil and gas industries.
Welcome back again. You're still watching us on the Daily Debate. I'm still joined in with Dr. Ibrahim al-Ghazawy, who is a professor of international relations. And Dr. Ibrahim, where you ended your statements before you went out to this report on the ailment and the echo of the positive progress that the Egyptian economy has made despite its strict austerity measures and strict financial reform program, which started back with the loans of the IMF in 2016. There was great criticism back then on why should Egypt do that, and how are we going to manage? But then the irony of, despite of everything, and it's not magic, it's just hard work basically and good administration, and despite the pandemic, we're still seeing Egypt doing really well, according to the World Bank and the IMF. Let's talk more about what does that mean to the Egyptian economy.
It means a story of success, in a nutshell, a story of success in a very relatively short time. When you talk about from the late 2016 and today we are in October 2020, so you talk about a couple of years, 3 or 4 years. So in the history of nations, the 3 or 4 years is just nothing. But it has given us this opportunity, this enormous opportunity to make this, diametrical challenges and changes in the nature of our economy. I'm talking about the mega national projects that address the problems of infrastructure, which has paved the way for a massive economic growth that will continue for years and years. So we have to understand that what is being done today, this tens of projects underway, is not meant to our needs in this year or the coming 1 or 2 or 5 years. It will address our needs for tens of years to come. That means this is the basis for a well-deserved development process in Egypt that will continue for years and years. What does it mean? It means we built on, as I said at the beginning, we have learned lessons. We built on these lessons. In 1980s, 90s, we did not have this infrastructure. We did not have this, capacity of expansion and, changing positively the economy features in Egypt at that time. That's why we have been, suffering for long years from.
Well, if you want to put it in a proper, we have been in coma for long years. We've been, clinically dead for long years.
It is really a coma that continued for years and years. But today the situation has, as I said, changed diametrically. You just mentioned, the side effect and the impact of COVID-19 on all the economies of the world, including the superpower in economy and also including, the Western world.
The developed countries in general, yes.
The developed countries in general, even the Gulf state countries.
That are advanced financially even.
Exactly. So I would say that more than 95 or 96% of the world countries, suffer from negative growth this year because of COVID-19. And the most recent report of the World Bank denotes this and states that Egypt is one of the very little economies in the world that keeps positive growth rate in this year, in spite of the epidemic of COVID-19 and all the strict measures that have been taken by different governments in Egypt specifically to curb the expansion of this virus in the society. We managed to maintain a growth rate of, as the International Institute says, not us in Egypt, 3.5. 3.5 is, as you said, a magic. This is a magic today, because in all African countries you don't have this rate. In all the Arab countries and the Middle East,
despite the challenges, and that's the irony, that's the magical part of it.
Despite all the challenges we face, despite that we started the economic reform programs in a very recent time. We didn't have this long years to build on, but we have just.
I mean, the amount of projects, and that's why I want to. I mean, pardon me for interrupting you because we're running very short of time, and that's just the point. I'm not going to talk about the leadership and administration, which we know very well we're blessed with, but really, let's talk more about the will of the people and the work and the determination. I mean, it's the Egyptian people who actually did those mega national projects that, according to any research and study in the world, would say it would take a minimum of 3 to 5 years, and they're doing it in 1 year, and we've seen that with the new Suez Canal. They're taking 2 years and 3 years for projects that would really seriously take, and even the infrastructure. So the Egyptian people are doing it, and the president's always keen to bless and thank the Egyptian people for their support, determination, and patience. What is required from the Egyptian people at this stage? Every single individual, what would you, as an international expert, tell them and advise them to do to keep going on this road, not to give up, to be patient, to not listen to anyone that is trying to sort of play with the minds? And why am I saying that? Because social media is really being very effective on individual level, even in terms of mood. And we're always reflecting this back to remind people that this is what you did, don't throw it all away. What is your advice to the Egyptian citizens?
Well, the first thing that we have to look into as Egyptians is to look around us. That's step number one. Look around us. What I mean by look around us is to see the countries around us, the region that we are part of, whether in Africa or in Asia, to realize that we are blessed. We are blessed because in a huge country geographically like Egypt, and in terms of population of over 100 million inhabitants.
And burdens of 30 years and coma for 30 years.
And coma and economy and everything else. But we still have this fresh hope for a change, and we are undertaking this very ambitious projects that day after day adds to our assets of the economy. As you mentioned, the Egyptian were, I would say, the word of success behind that, because Egyptians have suffered a lot and still suffering, by the way. Large sector of
Which is very normal, by the way, because it's not something to be shy or ashamed of. It's very normal.
On the contrary, we should be proud of that. We should be proud that all Egyptians are participating and taking part in the process of development. Egyptians understand the challenges, and they accepted easily and acceptingly such challenges. When we have the process of floating the Egyptian pound in front of foreign currency, especially American dollar, and with this sharp decrease in the value of Egyptian pound at that time, which meant a lot of difficulties for Egyptians, especially.
But that's the thing, Doctor. That was not the true reality of the Egyptian dollar currency anyway. To speak with, it was not the real amount of what it resulted in back then.
Yeah, of course.
It was just a fake, illusional number that didn't exist. In the world of economics, only experts would understand that.
Yes, but today, as our economy grows stronger, the value of Egyptian pound
and your production
increases,
is going also
and the
more.
Production rates are getting higher. Our dependency on the foreign commodities and
imports,
imports is getting less, in terms
and that
of
helped
number
us with COVID-19, by the way,
everything.
for people to understand how the
aspects.
cycle works.
Yeah, exactly.
That's how
exactly. The other thing, when we talk about, as I said, we have to look around us. The other thing which is so important is that we have to carry on our responsibilities individually. Everyone, we are responsible. We have to protect. We are not only responsible for ourselves as individuals,
or our own comfort zones.
Yeah, but we are all responsible for our, you know, our share of responsibility in our society, in protecting our country. And I'm quite sure that Egyptian, you know, awareness today is much higher and much better than it was 5 or 10 years ago, in terms of challenges and in terms also of, you know, identifying the positive outcomes of the change that take place in Egypt today. And if we, you know, I mean, probably if we'd like to talk about that, we need another episode of the program. But I'm talking about positive changes that everyone see whenever we go in Egypt today. We see different Egypt when we travel on the roads. We see different when we go to the slums. When we go to, you know, some places where usually we're very impoverished area today, its appearance have changed.
So there's a demographic change, that basic needs are being met. People are living better, decent lives, especially those
so in many levels,
in urgent need of help.
Exactly. And so I would say in many levels there is positive changes already took place and still taking place. That's a message to Egyptians that we are on the right track. I didn't say that we get rid of all our problems, because this is impossible to happen in a couple of years. But I said, you know, as I said at the earlier of this program, we put our hand on the right passage, and we go in the right passage. We go in the right route, in the right direction, and we tackle our problems and you know, all of them at the very same time, in parallel lines. So we talk about educational reforms, we talk about economic reforms, we talk about cultural changes, we talk about religious, you know, reviewing of our religious speech in different levels, and educational, I would say, efforts to review the way religion was being presented to some schools at early time in our 1980s and 1990s.
We're even in terms of respecting the others, and we're seeing this integrated in the primary level in schools today, where they're introducing this new subject of how to respect the other.
Exactly.
And that's the thing. And that's the thing. And I'm glad that we've had this conversation. I know it's very wide and there's so much to talk about, but definitely was an important note to talk about the people, because this utmost is all done for the people and by the people and for their children and generations. So any negativities or anything that, I mean, it's normal to lose hope every now and then, but looking around you would give you further determination to continue this battle, because if there's anything that is being done more than anything else in top of priority is beating time to be able to achieve as much as possible in the shortest time period ever for the Egyptian people. Dr. Ibrahim Al-Ghazawy, Professor of International Relations, thank you very much for joining me here on the Daily Debate this evening.
Thank you so much.
And this brings us to the end of our episode. Thank you for watching.